find out more on some of the big tech stories from this week with eMedia's Head of Development. That's Jason Adrian, who joins me now. Jason, good evening. Welcome. I'm a little worried. Facebook now wants access to my banking information. What exactly is the plan?
Considering the timing of this, I mean, just off the back of 80 million users getting their Facebook data stolen by Cambridge Analytica, now they want us to trust them with our bank accounts. I think that this is like preposterous, if anything. This is like the last thing you want Facebook to have is your banking data. They'll know where you shop, what you buy, how much money you have left in your bank account, and what are they giving in return? That's ultimately the question. They're arguing that they're going to give you access to manage your finances and accounts via the Messenger app, but is that a compelling reason to give all of your banking data over to Facebook?
That's not a new offering, though, because a lot of banks already have apps. There's cell phone banking, which allows you to pretty much do that. So what would Facebook offer that is different from what we already have on the market?
So it's quite vague as to what exactly they want to offer their users. But they want to insert themselves into the whole commerce chain by having relationships with the businesses on the one end and having the banks on the other end and the customer on the other end. They're trying to just insert themselves, but they haven't identified exactly how they're going to do that. The only reason we know about it is because some of the guys working in the banks have started talking about it, and Facebook admitted that this is something that they're looking into.
Interesting that they've only spoken to banks in the United States, and for this to roll out, I'd imagine that they'd have to go from one country to the next, trying to get the necessary permissions.
Absolutely. This is a very challenging thing to do. First of all, you have to go to every different country. You have to have relationships with those banks. And also, banks are notoriously safeguarded around the data that they have, their customer data. They're not going to share that easily, and different countries have different laws. So Facebook will have to navigate quite a bit of bureaucracy before they end up with your banking data.
How much longer do you think before they recover from the scandal with Cambridge Analytica? Do we trust them again, or are we still giving them the side eye at the family bribe?
Here's the thing, right? So people might not trust Facebook after the Cambridge Analytica thing, but the reality is that Facebook owns WhatsApp, they own Instagram, they own a number of other technology platforms that we don't even think about on a day-to-day basis. You have long conversations over WhatsApp, video calls, private, intimate discussions that we trust Facebook with, whether we know we're dealing with Facebook or not. So the trust factor is a big problem for the Facebook brand itself, but customers are ultimately handing over data like it's going out of fashion at this point to Facebook.
Let's talk about someone else who wants access to our private information. Apple now wants to use the iPhone as a substitute or a replacement for the passport. What's the thinking there?
So this makes a lot more sense to me from a consumer point of view, right? So if I could have my passport on my phone, it would make it much easier to travel around the world. Tap as if you're entering into a building, for example, and you could just walk into any country with your passport on your phone. That makes a lot of sense from the point of a consumer, but it's a very challenging problem to solve. Will governments hand over the identity of their citizens, which is this passport, to an organization like Apple? It also doesn't make sense because the majority of users are actually Android users globally. A lot of people use more Android devices than iPhones. So it would have to be a standard that each government would apply to every single device manufacturer. In this case, Apple owns the patent for the technology that they want to use. They essentially want to use RFID chips that are already built into your phone, plus your biometrics, which is your finger scan, your facial recognition, and they want to use that as the means of verification when you cross into another country.
But it's quite concerning then, isn't it, that all the tech giants keep asking for more ways to access what is very personal information, which ultimately, half the time, we don't know where this information goes to. And Apple has often taken pride in the fact that it's not very easy to hack their devices, but how would they secure something as personal as someone's passport details?
Yeah. So, I mean, you might trust Apple. Apple has had a good track record in terms of making users fully aware of what data is actually stored on the device and managing that data. But it's a Pandora's box, right? So once you allow Apple to do this, then you have to go Samsung, Huawei, and all of these other companies to have access to that type of data as well. And do you trust all of these companies? So that's the question you have to ask yourself. So it's quite an interesting challenge, I think, which hopefully they can solve.
Also very tricky becomes each country's readiness then. Once I've now downloaded the app and I'm able to scan my passport. I recently came back from a trip to Mozambique, for instance, and just looking at the infrastructure at the border,
yes,
I can tell you now that there isn't enough infrastructure to have a situation where iPhone users are coming in and scanning their devices, yes, instead of presenting a passport. So that would then lead to countries, I imagine, being a little more reluctant given the cost.
Absolutely. There would be an enormous capital investment that countries would have to make into this infrastructure, because on the one side, the consumer has the device in their pockets and they can tap, but the infrastructure that you require in order to actually go into a country and tap your device is a completely different ballgame, and you have to put money into getting that infrastructure. Is
this the next big thing for cell phone manufacturers?
It's definitely something that they're looking into. If Apple's looking into this direction, you can be pretty assured that every other device manufacturer will be investing a lot of funds into building this type of technology.
Well, Jason, let's leave it there for today. That was eMedia's Head of Development, Jason Adrian, talking to us about this week's big tech stories. Now,